The night was cold. The wind howled across the empty fields. Daniel pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders as he walked home from the village tavern. The stars above were hidden by thick clouds, and only the weak lantern in his hand kept the darkness away. Daniel lived alone on a small farm at the edge of the settlement. Most of his days were spent in silence, feeding his animals, repairing fences, or staring at the horizon. People in the village said he was strange. Some even called him cursed. But Daniel did not care. He had lost too much in his past, his wife to illness, his child in the Great Plague. Since then, he spoke little, lived quietly, and avoided attachments. As he walked along the muddy road, he heard something unusual. A faint cry, almost lost in the storm. He stopped, his heart pounding. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then the cry came again, soft and broken. Daniel raised his lantern high. The light trembled on the bushes near the road. He stepped closer. There, huddled in the shadows, were two small figures. Their skin shimmered faintly under the lantern glow, their hair tangled, their clothes torn. They were not human. Their large eyes reflected the light like mirrors. Their faces carried strange patterns, marks like faint glowing lines. Daniel froze. His first thought was fear. Aliens. The galaxy was wide, and rumors said strange beings often traveled near Earth's edge. Villagers whispered of kidnappings, of patrols searching for lost fugitives. Some even believed that helping such creatures could bring destruction. But the cries of the two girls broke through his fear. They were no older than 10, trembling, thin, their hands clutching each other tightly. One whispered something in a tongue he could not understand. The other looked at him with wide, desperate eyes. Please, Daniel heard the word, simple, broken, but clear. His lantern shook in his hand. He looked back toward the village. He knew if anyone saw this, they would call the patrols. They would drag the children away, or worse, execute them as runaways. Daniel had a choice. Turn away and live safely, or step forward and risk everything. His heart remembered another night many years ago when his own daughter had coughed in his arms, begging for help he could not give. He had been helpless then, but maybe not tonight. Daniel bent down. His voice was rough but gentle. Come with me. The girls hesitated. One of them whispered to the other, shaking her head in fear. But Daniel extended his hand slowly, his palm open. He forced a small smile on his face, though his chest tightened. You are safe here, he said softly. I will not hurt you. At last, the smaller girl stepped forward. Her fingers touched his hand, cold and trembling. Then the other followed, still watching the dark road behind them, as if expecting enemies to appear. Daniel wrapped his coat around their shoulders and guided them toward his farm. The lantern light swayed, shadows stretched across the field. He felt the weight of the night pressing down, but also something else, purpose. Something in his soul awakened again. When they reached his house, Daniel quickly shut the door and pulled the heavy lock. The girls stood in the middle of the room, shivering, staring at the fire in the hearth as if they had never seen such warmth before. Daniel gave them bread and water. They ate like they had not eaten in days. Who are you? Daniel asked gently. They looked at each other, afraid. The older one spoke slowly. Lost. That was the only word she said. Daniel nodded. He did not press further. He knew enough. They were running from something powerful, something dangerous. Outside, thunder rolled again. He stepped to the window and looked at the sky. Foe. For a moment he thought he saw lights moving in formation among the clouds. His blood turned cold. Ships. He quickly shut the curtain. Daniel sat back by the fire, the two girls curled up beside each. The storm faded by morning, but Daniel did not sleep. He sat near the hearth with his old rifle across his knees, watching the two strange girls as they slept. Their breathing was soft, but even in dreams they shivered, sometimes whispering in a language he could not understand. When the sun rose weakly through the clouds, Daniel stepped outside. The ground was wet, the field silent, but his eyes searched the sky. He thought again of the lights he had seen among the storm clouds. Were they real or just tricks of his tired mind? He could not be sure. Inside, the girls had woken. They looked around the small farmhouse with curiosity. Their large eyes touched every corner, the fire, the wooden walls, the small table where Daniel had left bread. Daniel brought them fresh milk. They drank quickly, spilling some on their clothes. For a moment, the scene looked almost normal, like children being fed by a father. But Daniel knew better. These were not ordinary children. They had marks on their arms, faint glowing lines that pulsed like living light. He wondered if they were scars or symbols. Daniel spoke gently. "What are your names?" The older one hesitated, then whispered, "Lyra." The younger lowered her head and said softly, "Nia." Daniel nodded. He would not push them for more. That afternoon he led them outside to show them the chickens and goats. The girls laughed for the first time. Their voices carried across the empty field, warm and bright. But in Daniel's chest, fear grew. If the villagers heard strange voices, they would come to investigate. Later, while chopping wood, Daniel heard the sound again. Engines far away, high in the sky. He froze, his axe still in his hand. The sound faded quickly, but he knew it was real this time. His stomach turned cold. They were being hunted. That night, Daniel sat with the girls by the fire. He asked again, "Why are you here? Who is after you?" The girls exchanged nervous glances. Lyra whispered, "Bad men." She struggled with the human words, then pointed to the sky. "Hunters," Nia added softly. "They kill family." Daniel's blood tightened. He did not need the full story to understand. Someone powerful wanted these children gone. He looked at their tired faces and knew they had already seen horrors beyond their years. The next morning, the danger became real. While Daniel was repairing a fence near the edge of the field, he saw dust rising on the far road. 3 armored vehicles rolled slowly toward the village, dark metal shining under the sun. He hid behind the fence, heart pounding. The patrol was not from Earth. Their symbols were alien, glowing blue against black steel. Soldiers in heavy armor stepped out, tall, broad, their helmets reflecting the light. They carried strange rifles, long and sharp. Daniel's throat went dry. From where he hid, he heard one of them speak through a machine translator. "2 fugitives, sighted near this sector." Another soldier replied, "Orders are clear. If locals resist, eliminate." Daniel's hands shook. He knew what this meant. If the villagers gave any hint of the girls, the soldiers would scour the land. He ran back across the field, pushing his old body faster than ever before. His lungs burned, but his fear was stronger. He burst through the farmhouse door. The girls looked up in shock. Daniel's face was pale. "Hide," he whispered urgently. He pulled a rug aside, revealing a trapdoor leading to a root cellar. "Go quickly." The girls obeyed, climbing down into the dark space below. Daniel shut the trapdoor and dragged a heavy chest over it. Just as he finished, loud knocks shook his door. The soldiers had come. Daniel opened slowly, masking his fear. 4 armored figures stood there, weapons across their chests. One of them raised a device and scanned the room. "Have you seen strangers?" the translator asked. Daniel forced a calm tone. "No, only me." The soldier's visor glowed faintly. Daniel could not tell if it saw through him. Days turned into weeks. The soldiers did not return, but Daniel knew it was only a matter of time. The Empire, or whatever force hunted the girls, would not give up. Still, each morning he woke to the sound of their laughter, and each night he sat by the fire with them, listening to stories told in broken human words. He had built them a small room out of old wood beside his own, a safe corner where they could sleep without fear. Lyra and Nia decorated it with simple drawings scratched on the walls, stars, suns, and strange alien symbols Daniel could not read. At times, the marks glowed faintly, as if alive. The girls grew stronger under his care, their cheeks filled with color, their eyes no longer hollow. They began helping him with the farm, feeding chickens, carrying water. Even the animals seemed to sense something gentle about them. The goats followed Nia like she was a queen, but Daniel noticed more. When the girls touched the earth, grass seemed to grow greener. When they sang softly, the air vibrated as if it carried hidden energy. Once he watched Lyra mend a broken fence post with her hands. The wood fused together like living bone. He asked no questions. His heart told him some truths were too dangerous to speak. One evening, as the fire crackled, Lyra sat beside him. She looked older than her years, her eyes heavy with secrets. "Daniel," she whispered, "our family, gone." Her voice trembled. "They kill father, mother, everyone." Nia leaned against him, tears in her eyes. "Only us left." Daniel's chest tightened. He put a hand on their shoulders. His voice was rough but steady. "You are not alone now." He did not care who had died or who hunted them. What mattered was here, now, in his home. But danger never slept. One night, Daniel woke to a strange sound outside, not the wind, not animals, a humming, faint but steady. He grabbed his rifle and stepped. Into the cold darkness, the field stretched empty, but above the stars shimmered unnaturally. A shadow moved across the sky, massive, silent. It was not a patrol ship. It was larger, heavier, like a predator watching its prey. Daniel rushed back inside, his breath sharp. He shook the girls awake. "Quiet," he whispered, pulling them close to the cellar. But Nia clutched his arm, her eyes wide. "They know," she whispered. "They follow us always." That night he did not sleep. The ship circled in the distance, never landing, never leaving. His farm felt smaller under its gaze. He realized then, hiding forever was impossible. The hunters would close in, and when they did, no wall of wood or soil would save them. The next day, Daniel tried to teach the girls how to defend themselves. He gave Lyra a small knife, Naya a slingshot. They practiced in the fields, laughing nervously. Daniel corrected their stances, but when Lyra threw the knife, it glowed in her hand before flying through the air, striking the target dead center. Daniel stared, breathless. These were not helpless children. They carried power, strange, dangerous power. That night, as the fire burned low, Lyra whispered, "We are not only children." She hesitated, then added, "We are heirs." The word struck Daniel like thunder. He looked at her, confused. She drew a glowing mark in the air with her finger, a crest that shimmered before vanishing. Nia spoke softly. "Our family. Rulers. Betrayed by own blood." Daniel leaned back, the truth sinking into his bones. They were not only hunted children, they were royalty, the last of a fallen throne, and he, a lonely farmer, had become their guardian. He closed his eyes. 1,000 thoughts pressed into him. He had lost a daughter long ago, yet fate had given him 2 more, ones who carried the weight of empires on their shoulders. Protecting them meant defying powers greater than he could imagine, but abandoning them meant betraying his own soul. Outside, the humming in the sky grew louder. Shadows passed again over the fields. The hunters were tightening the circle. Daniel stood at the window, rifle in his hands. His jaw tightened. For years he had lived empty. Now for the first time he felt fire in his chest. "They will come," he whispered, his voice low, steady. "But if they want you, they will go through me first." The girls looked at him with tears in their eyes. In their silence there was trust, a trust deeper than blood. The night stretched long, filled with whispers of engines and glowing marks across the stars. And in that quiet farm on the edge of Earth, a simple man made a promise that would echo across the galaxy. The days grew darker. The shadow in the sky no longer circled from afar. Now it hovered closer, sometimes blotting out the sun for moments at a time. The villagers whispered of omens. They spoke of strange lights and beasts of metal, and Daniel felt the walls of his world closing in. He tried to keep life normal for Lyra and Naya. They still helped on the farm, still laughed when the goats chased them. But at night, their faces grew pale as they stared out the windows, waiting for the hunters who never stopped searching. One evening, as the fire burned low, Daniel heard footsteps outside, heavy and steady. His heart froze. He grabbed his rifle and signaled the girls to hide. The door shook under a loud knock. "Open!" a mechanical voice demanded. Daniel stood firm, his hand trembling but his eyes hard. Slowly he opened the door. 3 armored soldiers stood outside, their helmets glowing faintly. One of them raised a device scanning the house. "Report of fugitives," the voice said. "You will allow search." Daniel stepped aside. He had no choice. His chest ached as the soldiers walked in, boots striking his wooden floor. They searched every corner, every drawer, every shelf. They eked. Then pulled open the cellar door, shining their lights inside. Daniel's heart almost stopped. But the girls were not there. The cellar was empty. The soldiers looked again, then shook their heads. The leader spoke flatly, "Nothing here." And they left. The door closed. Silence returned. Daniel rushed to the cellar. He yanked away the crates and climbed down. Empty. His hands shook. "Lyra, Nia," he called. His voice cracked. No answer. He searched the fields, the barn, the woods behind his house. His breath grew sharp. His legs burned, but still he found nothing. Hours passed. His farm stood silent. His chest felt hollow, like someone had torn out his heart. On the kitchen table lay only one thing: the carved stone the girls had carried since the night he found them. But now new symbols glowed on it, a message he could not read. Daniel fell to his knees. He gripped the stone in his rough hands. His tears fell onto its surface. He had promised to protect them. He had sworn they would be safe. Now they were gone, vanished without a trace. For days Daniel searched. He walked miles through forests and fields. He asked the villagers, but none had seen two strange girls. Some shook their heads with pity. Others whispered that the old farmer had finally gone mad. One man sneered, "Ghost children, Daniel, you lived too long in silence." But Daniel knew the truth. He had felt their warmth, their laughter. He had seen their tears. They were real, and now they were lost. His house grew colder with every passing night. The silence of the rooms pressed on him like a grave, yet the stone remained glowing faintly at night. Sometimes when the wind howled, he thought he heard faint whispers, voices calling from far away, but he could not understand them. One evening, after weeks of searching, Daniel returned home. His body weak, his spirit broken, he placed the stone on the table and stared at it. The symbols shimmered, shifting like living fire. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw their faces reflected in the glow. Lyra's steady gaze, Nia's soft smile, then it faded, leaving him in darkness. He whispered into the silence, "Where are you?" His voice broke. He had lost his daughter once, and now fate had taken away the only family he had found again. The nights stretched into months. Daniel grew older, his hair grayed, his hands stiffened. Still he waited. Every time the wind howled or lights moved across the sky, he hoped. But no footsteps came to his door, no laughter filled his house. In the village, people spoke less of him. He became the old ghost farmer, wandering the fields with a rifle and a stone. Some said he had lost his mind long ago. Others whispered that he guarded something too dangerous to name. But in Daniel's heart, one truth remained. Lyra and Nia had not been destroyed. Something else had taken them. Perhaps to safety, perhaps to danger beyond his reach. The not knowing tore at him worse than death. Then one night, as he sat alone by the cold hearth, the stone pulsed brighter than ever before. The marks burned with fierce light. Daniel reached for it with shaking hands, but before he could touch it, the glow faded, leaving it lifeless for the first time. Daniel lowered his head. His voice cracked as he whispered into the silence, "If you ever hear me, come home." Outside, far above the quiet farm, massive ships drifted in silence, watching, waiting. And though Daniel could not see them, his life was already tied to their fate. 12 years passed like a long shadow. Seasons changed. Winters froze the fields. Summers baked the earth. Daniel worked his land with slow hands, his body older, his hair now gray. Every morning he still woke before dawn, not because he wanted to, but because silence was heavier at night. The house felt empty without laughter. He kept the girls' small room untouched, their wooden carvings and glowing marks still on the walls. Though the glow faded long ago, Daniel could not bring himself to erase them. Sometimes he sat there alone, staring at the faded symbols, hoping they would light again, but they never did. The villagers no longer came near. Children whispered that the old farmer was haunted, that he spoke to ghosts. Adults looked at him with pity or suspicion, but Daniel did not care. His world had shrunk to his fields, his animals, and the stone he kept on the table. The stone never glowed again, yet he refused to throw it away. At night, he still thought of Lyra and Nia. He remembered Nia's shy smile when she first touched the goats, Lyra's steady eyes when she promised to help with chores. He remembered their laughter, their whispers, their fear. They had been more than strangers. They had been his family. Daniel's body weakened with age. His hands shook when he chopped wood. His back bent lower with every season, but his eyes stayed sharp, always searching the horizon. Some nights he swore he still heard engines in the sky, faint and distant, like hunters circling. He would step outside with his rifle, only to find empty stars. One autumn night, everything changed. The sky split with thunder, not from storms, but from engines too massive to be earthly. The ground shook. Windows rattled, animals screamed. Daniel stumbled outside, his old rifle in hand, his breath caught. Above the horizon, shadows spread wide, dark against the moonlight. Ships, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. vast shapes drifting through the sky like floating cities. Their lights shimmered in patterns, glowing like rivers of fire. The villagers poured into the streets, pointing, screaming. Some fell to their knees, thinking the end of the world had come. Daniel's heart pounded. His mind leapt back 12 years. He knew this was not a random arrival. This fleet had come with purpose, and deep in his chest he already knew for whom. The largest ship descended slowly. Its size blotted out half the stars. Engines roared like thunder, shaking the soil beneath his feet. Dust and wind blasted across the fields as it lowered. Its hull gleamed with strange metal, etched with golden crests that glowed against the night. Villagers scattered in terror. Some fled into the forest, others hid in cellars. But Daniel stood firm, leaning on his rifle. His coat whipped in the storm of the landing. His eyes did not blink, his heart beat like a drum. The massive vessel settled above his farm, lights pouring down like daylight. A ramp extended slowly, slamming into the earth with a deep echo. From the blinding light, rows of armored soldiers marched out, taller than humans, armor shining silver and blue. Their movements were precise, disciplined. They spread across his land like a royal guard. Daniel's breath grew sharp. He lifted his rifle instinctively, though he knew it was useless. The soldiers stopped, their weapons lowered, but not at him. Instead, they stood in formation, silent, waiting. Then another figure stepped forward, taller, wrapped in robes of light. Her steps were slow, graceful. When she reached the end of the ramp, she stopped. Her eyes met Daniel's from across the storm-lit field. For a heartbeat, Daniel forgot how to breathe. He saw her face, older now, stronger, yet unmistakable. The same steady gaze that once promised to help with chores, the same lines of light that had once glowed faintly on her arms. "Lyra," Daniel whispered. His voice cracked. Behind her, another figure emerged, smaller but radiant, with a smile that broke through the storm. "Nia," Daniel gasped. His chest ached, his hands trembled. The Tui Te Yuan. Oh, girls he had sheltered, fed, and loved 12 years ago now stood before him, no longer children, but women of power and royalty. Their robes carried the same crest that once glowed on the stone. Their presence made the ground itself seem to bow. The soldiers turned as one and dropped to their knees before Daniel. The sound of armor striking earth echoed like thunder. Daniel staggered back, confused. His rifle slipped from his hand. He had lived as a forgotten farmer. But now warriors from across the stars were kneeling before him. The ramp lights burned brighter, and Lyra's voice rose above the storm, firm and clear. "Protector," she called. Her words carried strength, yet her eyes softened with memory. "We have come for you." Daniel's heart thundered. His legs almost gave way. He did not understand, yet he knew one thing. His life, his silence, his waiting was over. The past had returned with fire and steel. Above him, the fleet hovered in silence, 1,000 lights watching. The galaxy had not forgotten the promise of a lonely farmer. The air trembled as the soldiers knelt before Daniel. The old farmer stood frozen in the storm of light, his gray hair whipped by the wind, his hands trembling at his sides. He had spent years forgotten, but now the galaxy itself bowed on his soil. Lyra stepped forward, her robe of light trailing behind her. Her eyes met his, and for a moment the years vanished. Daniel saw not the princess she had become, but the frightened child he had once sheltered by the fire. Her voice cut through the roar of engines. "Protector," she said, her tone strong, royal yet warm. "We are here because of you." Daniel's chest ached. He shook his head slowly, his voice rough. "I am no protector. I am just a farmer." Nia approached, her smile trembling as tears filled her eyes. "No, Daniel," she whispered. "You are our father." She knelt before him, her royal crown glinting with starlight. Lyra joined her, lowering her head. Around them, 1,000 armored soldiers stayed bowed. The sound of silence was heavier than thunder. Daniel's throat tightened. He tried to speak, but his voice broke. For 12 years, he had believed he had failed them. For 12 years, he had carried guilt and silence. Yet here they were, alive, powerful, and bowing to him. "Why," he whispered, his voice breaking, "why would royalty bow to me?" Lyra lifted her head. Her glowing marks shimmered brighter than ever. "Because you gave us life when others gave us death," she said. "Because when empires hunted us, you opened your door, you fed us, you sheltered us, you gave us hope." Her voice grew fierce, echoing across the field. "The galaxy fears power. But we learned from you that true power is kindness. Daniel's knees weakened. He dropped his rifle. It fell with a dull thud into the mud. His hands covered his face. He felt the years of pain wash over him, the weight of waiting, the emptiness of his house. All of it poured out as he wept openly. Naya reached out and held his weathered hands. Her fingers glowed faintly, warmth spreading through his tired skin. "We survived because of you," she whispered. "And now we have returned to keep our promise." Daniel looked at her through blurred eyes. "Promise?" he asked, confused. Lyra's voice was steady. "On the night we vanished, we swore to return when we could. We left the stone as our bond. We vowed that when we had the strength, we would come back for you." The soldiers rose as one, their movements sharp like steel. Behind them, banners of golden light unfurled from the great ship. Symbols of royalty burned across the sky. Villagers peered from the distance, their mouths open in disbelief. Some knelt, others fled. None dared speak. Daniel staggered back, overwhelmed. "I am only one man," he said. "I cannot lead fleets or rule kingdoms." But Lyra stepped closer, her voice calm yet powerful. "You do not need to lead with armies. You led us with your heart. That is why we are here. That is why they," she gestured to the soldiers, "kneel to you." A hush spread across the field. Even the engines of the massive ship quieted. The galaxy seemed to wait for his answer. Daniel's chest heaved. His hands shook as he looked at the two women who had once been helpless girls in his care. He saw the same eyes, the same spirit, but now wrapped in crowns and power. He thought of the lonely nights, of his promise whispered into the silence. "If you ever hear me, come home." And they had. The old farmer drew a long breath, his voice cracked but steady. "Then I will stand with you." A roar of approval shook the air, not from human throats but from alien voices. The soldiers struck their weapons against the earth, the sound like rolling thunder. The villagers fell to their knees. Daniel's small farm had become the heart of a new legend. Lyra and Nia stepped beside him, one on each side. Their hands touched his arms, guiding him toward the ramp of the massive ship. The light swallowed them. The galaxy had come not to destroy a forgotten man, but to honor him. As they walked, Lyra whispered softly so only he could hear, "The hunters who chased us are gone. They were destroyed by those who betrayed us. Now the throne is ours, but the crown is yours too." Daniel's steps faltered. "Mine?" he asked. His voice carried disbelief. Nia smiled through tears. "Yes, Father. The Empire knows you as protector, and they will follow your name." Above them, the fleet's banners burned brighter. The night sky itself seemed to bow. The lonely farmer of Earth was no longer forgotten. His story had become a force that would shake the stars. The light of the royal fleet covered the night sky. Entire villages knelt under its glow. Yet the focus of all this power was one old farmer who had once lived in silence. Nia guided him upward. His hands trembled, his heart pounded. He had spent 12 years believing he had been forgotten, yet now the galaxy itself had come to honor him. Inside the great ship, the walls shimmered like living crystal. Soldiers lined the path, their armor glowing faintly. They bowed their heads as he passed. Daniel's throat tightened. He had never been saluted, never been respected. For most of his life, he had been invisible. Now warriors who could crush cities lowered their eyes before him. Lyra led him into a chamber of light, its ceiling stretched high, stars shining as if the universe itself bent inward. In the center stood a throne forged from metal that pulsed with energy. The crest he had once seen carved on the girl's stone now blazed above it, golden and eternal. Daniel froze, his voice cracked. "This is not for me." But Naya shook her head gently. "It was always for you," she whispered. "You gave us family when we had none. You gave us life when death followed us. Without you, this throne would be empty." Lyra stepped closer, her voice strong enough to echo across the chamber. "The Empire needs more than crowns and armies. It needs a heart. It needs the man who showed two lost children what kindness means." Daniel's chest ached. His old hands shook. He saw his reflection in the shining floor. An aged farmer with gray hair, weathered skin, and eyes tired from years of waiting. He thought of the quiet nights he had spent whispering into the darkness, begging for the children to return. He thought of the villagers who mocked him, the emptiness of his fields, the stone that never glowed again. And now here he stood, at the center of a galaxy's gaze. The silence stretched heavy. All around him soldiers waited, officers watched, even the stars seemed to pause. Daniel lowered his head, and for a moment he almost refused. He was no king, no gens, Errol, no warrior. He was just Daniel, a man who once chose to open his door on a stormy night, but then he felt two hands slip into his own, small in his memory but strong now. He looked into Lyra's steady eyes, into Nia's hopeful smile, and he understood. He had not just saved them, they had saved him. They had given him back a reason to live. Daniel lifted his head. His voice broke but carried across the chamber. Then I will not turn away. If you ask me to stand with you, I will stand. The soldiers struck their weapons against the floor in unison. The sound thundered through the ship, through the skies. Villages below trembled as the fleet roared in answer. The galaxy had found its protector. Lyra and Nia guided him to the throne. He did not sit. Not yet. He placed his hand on its arm. The crest above flared brighter, spreading waves of light across the chamber, across the fleet, across the sky. The villagers gasped as golden fire lit the heavens. The world itself seemed to bow. Daniel turned to the sisters, his voice softer now. I do not know how to lead empires. Lyra smiled faintly. You do not need to. You only need to be what you always were. Our protector. Nia added with a trembling laugh. And our father. Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. He pulled them close, holding them as he had 12 years ago when they were frightened girls in his farmhouse. He whispered, Then I will protect you until my last breath. Outside, the fleet shifted into formation. Its banners burned brighter than suns. The sound of engines shook the night, but this was no sound of war. It was the sound of loyalty. Across the stars, messages spread quickly. The lost heirs had returned, and with them the man who had saved them. The protector of the royal bloodline, the farmer of earth who defied empires on his quiet land. Daniel had once believed his life ended with loss, but now, his story was no longer just his. It had become legend, whispered in the halls of power, sung in the camps of soldiers, taught in the schools of children across worlds. And in every telling, the final words were always the same. He sheltered two lost girls, and in return the galaxy sheltered him.